Today we read Chapter 3, The Case of the Greedy Moneylender, from Mangoes, Mischief, and Tales of Friendship, Stories from India, by Chitra Sandar, illustrated by Uma Krishnaswamy. And it's published by Candlewick Press. The Case of the Greedy Moneylender. Prince Vera had a busy schedule during the day. He had to get up very early to go swimming. After breakfast, he studied mathematics, science, and economics. After lunch, he practiced archery, horseback riding, and wrestling. One Wednesday, Suku was expected to join Vera for his morning swim. Vera waited at the riverbank, but there was no sign of his friend, and Vera swam alone. He expected Suko to join him, but he was disappointed. "Where is Suku?" Vera asked his mother. "Maybe he is needed at the farm today, son," said the queen. The whole day passed, and there was no sign of Suku. Vera couldn't wait any longer. He decided to go and find him. Vera rode his white horse through the wide streets of Himper. His personal guards rode behind him. The streets were lined with neem and banyan trees. Vera went past the village temple and the lotus lake, and then he crossed the bridge over the lake. The streets were narrower now, and the houses smaller. Large corn and paddy fields were dotted with farmhouses. "Look, the prince is here to see Suku," said a man looking up from his work. The people who lived in Suku's neighborhood were not surprised. Vera came often to visit Suku and spent lots of time playing in the streets. If he was not wearing expensive clothes or jewelry, or if there were no guards around the area, they would not realize it was Prince Vera playing hide-and-seek on the streets with the other boys. Vera dismounted from his horse outside Suku's parents' house. He knocked on the door, and Suku's father opened it. "Welcome, my dear prince," said Suku's father. "Good evening, sir. Where is my friend Suku?" asked the prince. "He has gone away on a short trip," said Suku's father. "What sort of a trip?" asked the prince. "He never mentioned anything. It was quite sudden, your majesty. He had to leave this morning." Prince Vera looked around. Suku's clothes were still there. His bag and shoes were there, too. "All his things are here," he said. "Please tell me what is going on." Suku's father could not hold back his tears any longer. "The greedy moneylender has taken my boy away, your majesty. I didn't want to burden you with my problems. Neither did Suku." "How much do you own the moneylender?" asked Prince Vera. 25 silvers. Just 25 silvers, but I don't have that money, and I won't until I complete my harvest and sell my crops in the market. "Who is this moneylender?" asked the prince. "He is very heartless." "Angar is his name," said Suku's father, and he explained. "Angar comes from a family of moneylenders. He charges heavy interest on the money he lends. He even leases utensils and jewelries for weddings, and he takes away people's belongings when they are unable to pay the interest. He is very greedy, your majesty." "I am going to do something about this," said the prince. "But Suku is still with him," said Suku's father. "I do not want to cause any trouble. I don't want anything to happen to my son, your majesty." "Get me a bag of 25 silvers," Vera said to his guard, "and get my friend back." Then, to Suku's parents, he said, "I'll teach the moneylender a lesson he will never forget." Suku's parents refused the money at first, but Prince Vera urged them to take it. After a lot of discussion, they finally agreed to accept the prince's help in bringing their son back. The next day, Suku returned home from the moneylenders, then headed straight to the palace with a bag of sweet potatoes and guavas. "Thank you," he said. "You have been very kind to us. My father will repay the money after the harvest." "Never mind, Suku," said Prince Vera. "I couldn't wait until the harvest to beat you at horseback riding or archery, could I?" "Ha! To be beaten, you mean," said Suku. "You can't wait to lose." "We'll see about that." "What happened at the moneylender's house?" asked the prince. "Did he hurt you at all?" "No, he just made me do all his chores," said Suku. "He made me count the money, make tea for him, and even wash his clothes. But that was easy. He only had 2 shirts and 2 dhotis." "Didn't you say he was rich?" Yes, he is, but he doesn't spend the money. He only eats 1 meal a day to save silvers. That is pure greed, said Prince Vera. Maybe he is saving the money for a reason. I don't think any reason is good enough to swindle people out of their possessions, said Suku. He makes people give up their hard-earned things and money just to fill his coffers. Does he have any children? No children, no family, said Suku, not even a pet. He lives alone, counts his money, eats, sleeps, and snores. He doesn't even have anyone to collect his dues. If people return the money late, he charges more interest. We have to teach him a lesson, my friend, said Prince Vera. We can't let him continue to cheat anymore. You mean report him to your father's court? Asked Suku. I don't think we can do that. People who borrow from him sign a paper that says they agree to the terms. Your father will throw the case out when he sees the papers. But that's not fair, said the prince. We have to teach him a lesson. How about a bit of Vera treatment? Are you ready for some fun? Then Vera whispered a plan to his friend. The next day, dressed as an ordinary farmer's boy, Vera set off to see the moneylender. No one noticed him as he walked down the street and turned right at the village square onto a road lined with beautiful magnolia trees. The fragrance was wonderful. Angar the moneylender lived at number 77. A large statue of a white elephant stood outside the door. No one could miss that, thought Vera as he knocked. A thin, scrawny man opened the door. I'm here to see Angar, the moneylender, said Vera. What for? Barked the man. To borrow some cookware for my sister's wedding. Come in, said the man. Vera stepped inside. The house was large and spacious, but he noticed that there wasn't any furniture, except for a desk set upon a dais. The seating area was covered in silk. There wasn't a single chair to sit on. The man climbed onto the dais and sat down on the silk-covered floor. I am Angar, he said. What kind of pots and pans do you need? Can I look at them and decide? Asked Vera. The moneylender pointed to a green door. Vera pushed it open and stepped inside a room filled with pots, pans, ladles, and cups. They were made of copper, bronze, and steel, and some were made of earthenware. Vera took a selection of bronze vessels and stepped out again. He put them on the floor and said, These are the ones I need. Very well, then, you are taking 10 pots. You must return them in the same condition in a week's time. You owe me 3 silvers now and 2 silvers when you return them. The moneylender wrote down the details in his notebook. Vera signed the agreement and handed 3 silvers to the moneylender and then took his pots and left. 1 week went by, and then 2. A whole month had passed, and still Vera had not returned the pots. I think we have waited long enough, said Suku. We should return the pots to the moneylender. Angar must have forgotten about them by now, said Vera. He hasn't sent anyone to get them. He doesn't do that, explained Suku. He simply charges more. Make sure you bring some extra silvers with you. Don't worry, my friend, said Vera. I have enough to keep Angar happy. He carefully lifted 20 pots and placed them in a cart. Suku drove the cart while Vera sat inside holding the pots. The boys arrived at the moneylender's house and unloaded the cart. On hearing them, Angar appeared from inside. Where were you all this time? He yelled. You should have returned these pots weeks ago. I will have to charge you more now. Vera smiled. Well, kind sir, there is a small problem. You asked me to return the pots in the same condition, but I'm afraid that is not possible. Why not? Did you break them? How did you break the bronze pots? I didn't break them, said Vera, but you see, these pots gave birth to little ones. They were in a delicate state. I couldn't bring them until the little pots were strong enough to travel. Strong enough? Asked the moneylender. What are you talking about? See, dear sir, didn't you realize that the pots you lent me were with children? Explained Vera. After the wedding was over, I left them in the pantry for just a few hours, and then I heard sounds of the pots rattling and clanging. When I rushed in to check, there were little pots in them. I don't believe this, said Angar. I knew you'd say that, said the prince. Here, I brought your pots with their little ones. They all belong to you, rightfully. Angar counted the big pots. There were 10. He counted the small pots. There were 10. Well, what a neat profit. Thank you, young man, he said. You are very honest. Others would have hidden the little pots and never returned them. Even though Angar was happy with his little pots, he still charged Vera for the delay in returning the large ones. Vera forked over 5 silvers and returned home with Suku. I couldn't believe it when he actually stroked the little pots with love, said Suku. That man is so greedy. Let him enjoy his pots while he can, said Vera. His eyes glinted at the prospect of teaching Angar a lesson. No one mistreated his friend and got away with it. A week later, again dressed in ordinary clothes, Vera set off to the moneylender. This time he needed no introduction. When he asked for 20 pots, the moneylender was more than happy to lend them. Please take as many as you like. Remember to bring back any little ones, he said, giving him a receipt for 6 silvers. Vera returned home and set the pots in the royal kitchen. They weren't going anywhere again. Suku and Vera continued with their lessons for a month before they remembered Angar and his pots. Now that we are done with our lessons, do you think Angar is ready for his? Suku asked. That sounds like fun, said Vera, and they discussed what they would tell Angar. Vera and Suku set off on their horses, but they dismounted before they reached Angar's house. They walked up to the door and knocked. When the door opened, Vera and Suku burst into crying. They sat on the doorstep and cried loudly. They wailed and they screamed, and the whole street came to watch. What's wrong with you? Asked Angar. Why are you crying? It's about the pots. I can't bear to tell you, said the prince. What about the pots? You see, they are bronze pots. They were very old. I know, they are my family heirlooms, irreplaceable. I had to buy them now. It would cost me at least 500 silvers. On hearing this, Vera and Suku sobbed more. Tell me what's wrong, Angar said. Do you remember those pots gave birth to the little ones last month? Asked Vera. I remember. What happened now? Well, the pots must have been very ill. Didn't you take care of them properly? After we put them in the pantry, there was no noise. I went to check on them, but unfortunately they were all dead. Dead? Yes, the pots died yesterday at dawn, cried Vera. I am so sorry. How can pots die? They are made of bronze. Angar threw up his hands in despair. Well, if they can give birth to little bronze pots, can't they die too? Asked Suku. Angar had no answer to this. He hung his head in shame. The whole street laughed at his misery. From that day onward, Angar stopped being greedy. He charged fair interest, and he never unjustly took away things or children from anyone ever again.